Parshas Devarim, Moshe Rabbeinu begins reviewing the history of Klal Yisrael in the desert. When does Moshe Rabbeinu begin talking? So the pasuk says, "Be'echad." Take a look right at the beginning of Devarim. It was in the 40th year, in the 11th month, on the first day of the month. What's the 11th month? Nisan, Iyar, Sivan, Tammuz, Av, Elul, Tishrei, Cheshvan, Kislev, Teves, Shavat. The parsha begins at Rosh Chodesh Shavat. At the end of Chumash Devarim in Parshas Zos HaBracha, Moshe Rabbeinu moves on to the next world. When did Moshe Rabbeinu move on to the next world? Zayin Adar. The 7th day of Adar is Moshe Rabbeinu's yahrzeit. So how long did it take for Moshe to say the whole Chumash Devarim? Starts Rosh Chodesh Shabbat, he ends on Zayin Adar. That's 5 weeks. The whole Chumash Devarim was said by Moshe and taught by Moshe Rabbeinu over 5 weeks. Moshe Rabbeinu goes through the history of Klal Yisrael, through the Midbar. Of course, he goes through the Chet HaMeraglim again. And as we mentioned each day since Shivas B'Tammuz, we try to talk about Eretz Yisrael and the beauty and how important Eretz Yisrael is, and how important living in Eretz Yisrael is during these, and to talk about this during these times. Rav Kook makes the point, said it many times, everybody needs to remember this every day during the 3 weeks, besides the whole year. The 3 weeks, Shavasa B'Tammuz till Tisha B'Av, it culminates in Tisha B'Av. Yet this year, Tisha B'Av should be a yontif with Mashiach Tzidkenu. Tisha B'Av. 2 of the 5 reasons we fast on Tisha B'Av is because the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed by the Babylonians, the second Beis HaMikdash was destroyed by the Romans. And why did this occur on Tisha B'Av? Not a coincidence. It's because on Tisha B'Av, the Chet HaMeraglim occurred. That's what the Gemara tells us in Masechta Tainis Daf Chavtes. The Gemara makes the cheshbon there when they left, the 40 days when the Meraglim came back, and the night of Tisha B'Av, the Jewish people were crying in their tents, "We don't want to go." Rebbeinu Shalom said, "What are you crying for? I'm giving you a beautiful gift. You're going to love Eretz Yisrael. What are you crying about? You want to cry Tisha B'Av? I'll give you reasons in the future to cry Tisha B'Av." So the root of Tisha B'Av lies in the Chet HaMeraglim, and therefore Rav Kook says during this time people should focus on being Masake in the Chet HaMeraglim, and Chet HaMeraglim was Lashon Hara and Eretz Yisrael, and we need to be Masake in that. Talk about Eretz Yisrael, the beauty, the wonderful life in Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvahs you can do in Eretz Yisrael, the mitzvah to live in Eretz Yisrael, and that's what we've been doing. We talked about the Rambam, the Ramban, Maimonides, Nachmanides. Yesterday we spoke about the Rambam and why he doesn't count in one of the 613 mitzvahs, yet his halachas say he counts all the halachas. In Parshas Balak, we all remember the story. The donkey opens his mouth and starts talking to Balak. But before he opened his mouth and spoke to Balak, and spoke to Bilam, Bilam hit the donkey 3 times. Donkey, 3 times. In Bamidbar, Perek Chaf Beis, Pasuk Chaf Ches, it says, "Vayiftach Hashem es pi ha'asen." Hashem opened the mouth. In other words, He gave this donkey the ability to talk. Vatomer leBilam, and the donkey said to Bilam, "Me asisi lecha." What did I do to you? Ki hisani zeh shalosh regalim. That you hit me 3 times. Remember yesterday we talked about shalosh regalim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. We talked about Aliyah L'Regel on the Shalosh Regalim. And we talked about Regalim, meaning besides time, 3 times. Regalim also means Raglayim, feet. We talked about the Gemara in Chagiga Daf Daled, where if a person was a mafanki, he was a mafunik, and it was uncomfortable for him to take off his shoes on the Harabayis. You're not allowed to walk on the Harabayis with your shoes. So before you enter the Harabayis, you take off your shoes. And this a person is uncomfortable. He has to walk without his shoes. He's going to touch a pebble and it's going to hurt. He says, I can't make Aliyah Laharabayas. Either I'm going to wear my shoes, which I'm not allowed to, but I can't take off my shoes. The Torah says if you're uncomfortable, you don't have to come. We talked about yesterday the amazing idea behind this halacha that someone that's not comfortable doesn't have to do a mitzvah. We don't have this anywhere else except sitting in a sukkah. I put them in a sukkah for the reasons there. But a person sitting at the Seder table says, I don't like matzah, it's uncomfortable to eat matzah. You eat the matzah. Discomfort, human discomfort, the pebbles are going to make me uncomfortable, so you don't have to come to the Beis HaMikdash 3 times a year. We talked about that yesterday. If you're uncomfortable, sei gesund, bleiben stehen. So, if it's uncomfortable, you don't want to come to the Beis HaMikdash to be makabel pnei Shechina. You don't want to come to the Beis HaMikdash to greet the Shechina. You don't want to come to Beis HaMikdash to have a relationship with the Rebbeinu Shalom 3 times a year because the pebbles are going to hurt the bottom of your foot. Stay home. I'm not going to force you to have a relationship with me, the Rebbeinu Shalom says. So we talked yesterday about the Sholish Regolim, the 3 Yomim Tovim. So here, the donkey says to Bilam, why did you hit me, Zeh Sholosh Regolim? The donkey didn't say, why did you hit me, Sholosh Pa'omim, 3 times. It says Sholosh Regolim, which sounds like the donkey, while he's saying, why did you hit me 3 times, he's also indicating something about the Sholosh Regolim, Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. And that's what Rashi tells us. Zeh Sholosh Regolim, Rashi there tells us, Ramazloi, the donkey is giving Bilam a hint that what you're trying to do, you're trying to ride me to Balak, to try to curse the Jewish people, Chas v'shalom. That's what you're doing. I'm telling you, you're going to fail. How do I know as the donkey that you're going to fail? Ata mavakesh laka uma hachogeges sholish regolim b'shana. Don't you understand what you're doing? You're riding me to go to Balak and try to curse out of existence, Chas v'shalom, the Jewish people who have Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. They have Sholish Regolim. That's why the donkey said, why did you hit me, Sholish Regolim? He's trying to get Bilam to understand. You hit me, Sholish Regolim, not Sholish Pa'omim. You hit me, Sholish Regolim. What are you trying to do, Bilam? You're trying to go curse the Jews out of existence. The Jews have Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. You can't do it. Bilam doesn't get the hint. He keeps on going. The Mefarshim asked, the famous kasha, why is the donkey, obviously these words were put in the donkey's mouth by the Rebbeinu Shalom. Yiftach Hashem es pi ha'asam. God opened the mouth of the donkey. And God puts the words into the donkey's mouth. Bilam, where are you going? The Jews have Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot. Why did God put those words into the donkey's mouth? Why didn't he put the words into the donkey's mouth? Bilam, where are you going? Jews are Shayim Shabbos. Bilam, where are you going? The Jews are Makriv Karbanos. Bilam, where are you going? The Jews fast on Yom Kippur. Bilam, where are you going? The Jews learn Torah. The Rebbeinu Shalom puts into the mouth of the donkey, Bilam, where are you going? You can't succeed here. The Jews have Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot. They're Sholosh Regalim. They are Ola Regel 3 times a year. What are you thinking? You can't destroy a people who have Sholosh Regalim. Why was that in particular picked? Let's take a look at a Rav Kook that comes from a Gemara in Brachos, at the end of Brachos. And it's about, again, the Chet HaMeraglim, which is in this week's parasha. And this comes from the Sefer of Iyunei Aya, from Rav Gil Devere. Was we used the Sefer several times before. He selects a piece of Rav Kook, and he explains it into the parasha. The first page of the handout is page 195, and it quotes a Gemara from Brachos. It's at the end of Masechta Brachos, and Daf Samach Gimel Amud Beis. Samach Gimel Amud Aleph from Amud Beis. Amar Rav Safra. Rav Safra said, Rabavo have a mishtoi. Rabavo used to tell the following story. Kshiyoret Chanina ben Achi Rabbi Yoshua. Let's start with Rabbi Yoshua. Rabbi Yoshua is one of the 5 Talmidim of Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai who is mentioned in Pirkei Avos. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai had 5 major students. Rabbi Yeshua is one of them. Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai lived at the time of the destruction of the second Beis Hamikdash through the Romans. And Rabbi Yochanan ben Zakkai is the one that's negotiating with Vespasian. So he's right there at the Churban of the second Beis Hamikdash. And his 5 students are living at this time as well. One of them is Rabbi Yeshua. So we're talking about a time of transition. The Beis Hamikdash is about to be destroyed. The Jews are going to be exiled to Babel. So this is the Rabbi Yeshua we're talking about. And we're specifically talking about a person by the name of Hanina, who is the son, Ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua. He is the son of Rabbi Yeshua's brother. In other words, this Hanina is Rabbi Yeshua's nephew. So we're going to talk about this Hanina throughout the story. And this Hanina is Rabbi Yeshua's nephew. And he's a great Talmud Chacham, Rabbi Yeshua's nephew. Hanina ben Achi Rabbi Yeshua l'Goyla. When this Hanina went to Bavel, he would do Ibur Shana and Kaviyas Chadashim Chutz La'aretz. In other words, when is Rosh Chodesh? We know Rosh Chodesh can be on 1 or 2 days. On the Jewish calendar, a Jewish month can have 30 days, or a Jewish month can have 29. 29 or 30, not 30, 31 like the Gentile calendar, the secular calendar. A Jewish month is 29 or 30. If the month has 29 days, Rosh Chodesh is the next day, Aleph. If a month has 30 days, then Rosh Chodesh is 30th day, and the next day, Aleph, is the second day, Rosh Chodesh. That's how a Jewish calendar works. How do you declare whether Rosh Chodesh, whether a month is 29 days or 30 days? So there was a process when there was a Sanhedrin in Eretz Yisrael. 2 witnesses came to Yerushalayim. They testified about the new moon, etc. Long, complicated sugya in Masechta Rosh Hashanah. So you needed the 2 witnesses, and you needed a Sanhedrin in order to say how long a month is, 29 or 30 days. And then you needed a Sanhedrin to decide under what circumstances they would make a leap year and add an Adar Beis. This all required a Sanhedrin in Eretz Yisrael. There's no Sanhedrin in Eretz Yisrael right now. The Sanhedrin went into exile even before the Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. So how are Jewish people going to have a calendar? How will they know when Rosh Chodesh is? And how will they know whether there's a leap year? And what's the byproduct of this? If you don't know when Rosh Chodesh is, you don't know if a particular month has 29 days or 30 days, you don't know whether a year is a leap year or not, you can't have Yontif on the right day. Right? There's going to always be, Tishrei could be 29 or 30 days, Cheshvan could be 29 or 30 days, and so Kislev, Tev, Shabbat, Adar, is there an Adar Beis or not? We don't know. Then comes Nisan. Is it Nisan or Adar Beis? And if it is Nisan, what day is Pesach? There were a couple of months here, I didn't know whether the month is 29 days or 30 days. I don't know exactly what day Pesach is. I don't have the 10 shekel calendar that I got at the Sfarim store. There are no calendars in the Sfarim store. There are no Sfarim stores. There are no calendars. Everything is being done by witnesses in the Sanhedrin. So what do? So this Hanina is now in Bavel, and he decided that he was a great enough Talmud Chacham to himself declare when Rosh Chodesh is and declare when there would be a leap year. Shigru Acha Shnei Talmidei Chachamim. So from Eretz Yisrael, they sent 2 Talmidei Chachamim to talk to Hanina. Rabbi Yossi ben Kippur and Ben Beno shel Zechariah ben Kavutel. They sent these 2 Talmidei Chachamim. One is Rabbi Yossi ben Kippur and one is Zechariah ben Kavutel. For purposes of this story, we'll call them the 2 Talmidei Chachamim. So the story is about Hanina and the 2 Talmidei Chachamim. Kivan Sharosam, Hanina sees these 2 Talmidei Chachamim have arrived in Bavel. Amalahem, Hanina says to the 2 Talmidei Chachamim, Lama Basa, why are you here? Why did you come to Bavel? Amrulei, so the 2 Talmidei Chachamim said to Hanina, Lul my Torah banu, we came to learn Torah from you. You're such a great Talmud Chacham. We left Eretz Yisrael to come to Babel. Remember, we talked about that in the Rambam. Under what conditions can you leave Eretz Yisrael? One of them was to learn Torah from a very special Rebbe. So these two Talmidei Chacham say, we came to learn Torah from you. Hichriz Aleim, when he heard this, Hanina announced to the Jewish community in Babel, Anoshim Halalu Gidoyle Hadarheim. These two Talmidei Chacham are Gidoyle Hadar. Remember, I said anybody who wants to do a Google search, not a Google search, one of these Talmud, they have the Talmud on computer, on a disk. Look up how many places Chazal used the word Gadol Hadar. We know the Gemara says Amram was a Gadol Hadar in Sota. We learned about that. We know that the Gemara says Machlon and Chilyam were Gedolei Hadar. We saw that in Baba Basra about leaving Eretz Yisrael. And now we have Hanina calling these two young men Gedolei Hadar. So because they came to learn Torah from him, and he considers himself the Gadol Hadar, so he announces that these two fellas who came to learn by me, they're Gedolei Hadar also. And it happens to be that the ancestors of these two fellas, these two Talmidei Chachamim, they were in the Beis Hamikdash. Brings down a story. One of the two Talmidei Chacham we said was Zechariah ben Kavutel, and Zechariah ben Kavutel's father used to read Sefer Daniel to the Kohen Gadol on Yom Kippur. We'll leave out that part of the story. He's just proving that these two wonderful Talmidei Chachamim, not only a Talmidei Chachamim, they have a tremendous yichus. They have ancestors that actually were in the Beis Hamikdash and served in the Beis Hamikdash. Hischel Humatam. So now now Hanina and the two Talmidei Chachamim begin learning. They came to learn from him. So they start learning. Every time a Shaila comes up and he says something is Tameh, they paskin it's Tam. Hu Oiser, every time a Shaila comes to him and he says it's prohibited, Vehei Matir. And they say no, it's mutter. So these two young Talmidei Chacham who came to learn from him, every time he says something, they contradict him and prove him, so to speak, wrong. Now, remember, he announced to the general Jewish community in Bavel, these two fellas should be respected. They're Talmidei Chacham, they're Gedolei Hadar. Hichves Aleim. Now he refutes his own announcement. This is announcement number 2 by Hanina. Anoshim Halol Shel Shodheim. These two people, these two gentlemen who I originally said are Gedolei Hadar, they're worthless. Shel Toyuhem. They're Toyu. They're nothing. Amulai, the two Talmidei Chachamim say back to Hanina, Kvar Banisa, you already built up our reputation. You said we're Gedolei Hadar. V'ato yochol listor. You can't contradict that. You told the public we're Gedolei Hadar. Kvar Gadarta, v'ato yochol lifritz. You built a fence. You can't break down the fence. We are who we are, and the public knows that now. Amalem, so he said, if that's the case, Hanina said to them, Neimani matame v'ate metarim, ani oise v'ate matirim. So what's going on here? If you came to learn Torah from me, and you consider me such a big Talmud Chacham, why everything I say do you contradict and try to prove me wrong? Amrulai, so the two Talmidei Chacham said to Hanina, because we, so to speak, have to put you in your place. You are a great Talmud Chacham, you are a Gadol Hadar, but you need to be put in your place, and we were sent here from Eretz Yisrael by the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael to put you in your place. Because you are doing the work of declaring Rosh Chodesh and declaring leap years here in Bavel and Chutz La'aretz, and you're not allowed to do that. So we came to show you that you're not as big as you think. You can be metame something, you can be metame something, we'll be metayrit. You can answer something, and we'll be matirit, and we'll prove that we're right. And you'll understand that you're not holding yet by declaring Rosh Chodesh and declaring leap years. Amalahem, so Hanina said back to them, why can't I do it? The great Rabbi Akiva, he was in Chutz La'aretz, and while he was in Chutz La'aretz, he declared Rosh Chodesh, he declared leap years, and nobody complained about it. So if Rabbi Akiva can do it, I can do it. Amulai, so the two Talmidei Chacham said to Hanina, Hanach Rabbi Akiva, Leave Rabbi Akiva out of this picture. Shelo kinir kamosa be'eretz Yisrael. Because after Rabbi Akiva left Eretz Yisrael and was in Chutz La'aretz, there was no one in Eretz Yisrael as great as Rabbi Akiva. Under those conditions, where the Talmud Chacham leaves Eretz Yisrael and there's nobody left in Eretz Yisrael that's as great as him, that Talmud Chacham has the right to establish Rosh Chodesh and establish leap years, even if he's in Chutz La'aretz. Nobody's been left behind to compare to him in Eretz Yisrael. Amalem, so Hanina says, I remember when I left Eretz Yisrael, there's no greater Talmud Chacham than me. Sounds a little strange that a person is talking about himself this way, but that's what Hanina says. When I left Eretz Yisrael, like when Rabbi Akiva left Eretz Yisrael, nobody left behind was as great as him, and he had permission to declare Rosh Chodesh. When I left Eretz Yisrael, there's nobody greater than me, and so I have permission to declare Rosh Chodesh. Amulo, so these two Talmidei Chacham said to him, Gedayim shehinachta nasyu tuyoshim bali kanayim vehem shiguna etzlecha. You need to understand, yes, maybe when you left Eretz Yisrael, you were the greatest Talmud Chacham. When you left Eretz Yisrael, you left young, call them for this, young goats. You left young goats in Eretz Yisrael. And while you were in Bavel, the young goats became very, very big goats. And these big goats have big rams. And now there are people in Eretz Yisrael that are bigger than you and greater than you. Therefore, you no longer have, if you ever had, the power to be Kovei Chadoshim. There are greater people than you in Eretz Yisrael. V'heim shegruno etzlecha. And those people in Eretz Yisrael who you left as young goats, who are now big goats with mighty, powerful horns, they are greater than you, and they sent us to you to tell you to stop. V'chein amru lanu, and the message that they told us to send to you is as follows. L'chu v'imru lo b'shmeinu. Go tell Hanina, as great as Hanina is, go deliver the following message. Im shomei motav, if he's willing to listen to the message that he needs to stop declaring Rosh Chodesh in Chutz La'aretz, fine, everything's fine. Vimlav, but if he continues to hold himself out as the biggest Talmud Chacham, and he continues to declare Rosh Chodesh in Bavel, Yehei Benidui, we put him in Chayver. Deliver that message to him. If he doesn't cease and desist, he is going to be in Chayver. And also send the message to our brothers who are in Chutz La'aretz. If they continue following Hanina and following his declarations of Rosh Chodesh, he is in Chayrim. And number two, Im Shomim Mutav, if the community in Bavel will listen to us in Eretz Yisrael, and they will ignore Hanina, good. V'im lav, and if they continue to abide by Hanina and his declaration of Rosh Chodesh, we give them the following eitzah. Yalu lahar, let them find a mountain in Bavel, let them go up the mountain. Achia yivna mizbeach, just a particular person, we're not going to go into who Achia is. Let Achia build a new mizbeach in Bavel on top of the mountain. Hanania yinagim bekina. Let Hanania start playing the bekina, the violin, let's call it. In other words, build yourself a new Beis Hamikdash there. You're not part of the Jewish people anymore. If Hanina continues to declare Rosh Chodesh, and the people in Bavel continue to follow him, they should separate from the rest of Klal Yisrael. They're not part of the Jewish people. Let them go up to a mountain, build a new altar. Achia, build the Mizbeach, bring your sacrifices there. Hanania should play the violin and sing the songs on top of the mountain with the korbanos. V'chapru kulam, v'yomru, and let everybody finally deny the truth. Let them say what's going on. And let the communion Bible say, Ein lahem chelek b'elokei Yisrael. Let them declare that they're no longer part of the Jewish people and no longer worshiping the same God. That's an unbelievable message. Let the Jewish people in Bavel declare we are no longer part of the Jewish people. We have our own God, our own altar, and our own Leviim. We have nothing to do with the people in Eretz Yisrael. Why? Because you cannot declare Rosh Chodesh in Bavel. Miyad go kol ha'am bebechia v'amru. When the Jewish community in Bavel heard this message from these two Talmidei Chacham from Eretz Yisrael, they all cried and they said, Chas v'shalom. God forbid, we're never going to do such a thing. Yesh lanu chelek be'elokei Yisrael. We want to be part of the Jewish people and we want to worship the same God. We are not going to listen to Chanina. We're going to cease and desist from this kind of activity. What's this big issue here that the declaration of Rosh Chodesh and the declaration of a leap year has to come from Eretz Yisrael? Mishum Shenema, because it says Ki Mitzion Teisei Saira Udva Hashem Yerushalayim. Our famous song on Simchas Torah, a pasuk in Navi, Ki Mitzion Teisei Torah. Torah has to come from Zion. Udva Hashem, and the word of God, Yerushalayim. And therefore, nobody declares Rosh Chodesh. Nobody declares leap years except if you're in Eretz Yisrael. Rabbi Akiva was the sole exception because of his greatness. When he was in Bavel, nobody compared to him in Eretz Yisrael, and he had the right to declare Rosh Chodesh. Anyone other than that can't do it. It must be done in Eretz Yisrael by Talmidei Chacham in Eretz Yisrael. To skip the paragraph, Rav Kook asks, Madua lefnei sheshnei chacham afiku es Chanina heim tiru ashetime v'tiru she'asur abikshu loyma bazeh. Part of the story here is that the two Talmidei Chachamim, they came to Chanina and they said, we want to learn Torah from you. Why this whole charade? Why did they just come to Chanina and say, listen, we have a message for you. You need to cease and desist. And then the rest of the story would unfold. He would say, well, if Rabbi Akiva can do it, I can do it. And then they would tell him, no, you can't. Instead, there's this middle part of the story. We came to learn Torah from you. And then he starts teaching them. And every time he says something is tameh, they say it's tam. Every time he says something is asa, he says it's mutter. And then they get into this thing where he announces that these people are worthless, and they say, no, we're not. What's that middle part of the story about? Come to Bavel, meet with Chanina, and tell him we have a message for you. You cannot do what you're doing, and if you don't cease and desist, you're in chayrim. What's this middle story about? Rav Kook explains as follows. Kedoshim Heimel Kol Protei V'Dikdukei Torah. All of the details of the Torah, each of them is holy. We have something called the mitzvah of matzah. Then the details. How do you make matzah? Water and flour. What kind of flour? What kind of water? When the matzah is made, how long does it take to make the matzah? When you finally have the matzah, what day do you eat it? What night do you eat it? And when you're eating it, when do you eat it in the Seder? And when you're eating it in the Seder, how much do you eat? How kazai is? How big is a kazai is? When do you eat it? Before Chatzos, can you eat it after? The world of details in every mitzvah. All these details are very holy. We're very careful with these details, and we observe these details with a love for the mitzvah. Woe to the person that steps on any of these details and says, it's not that important. As long as I eat matzah, is it a kazayah? It's not a kazayah. What's the big difference? As long as I eat a piece of matzah. And before chatzos, after chatzos, what's the big difference here? Every diktuk and halacha is loved by us because through the diktuk and halacha, we know we're doing the mitzvah properly and we love doing mitzvahs. If we want to do the mitzvah properly, we need to keep the details. Omnam, however, details need to have a root. You don't walk, again, we mentioned this many times. The Gemara in Baba Kama, there's an Omid Gemara in HaChoivel where the Gemara has what we call common sayings that occurred in that time. The Gemara goes through a list. People say this, people say this. The Gemara is teaching us lessons, but these were common phrases in those days. One of them is Hamra Lamori V'Tabi L'Shake. The wine belongs to the person who's making the party, and the butler gets the thank you for serving the wine. The butler's coming around with his little tray with the little glasses that are filled with wine. Everybody takes a cup off the tray and says, thank you to the butler. When you take the wine off the tray, you don't run over to the balabai and say, oh, thank you to the wine. So Gemara just giving us an example. The wine belongs to the person who's throwing the party, and the thank you goes to the butler who's serving the wine. The Gemara is teaching us sharashiyas. People have the superficial vision. I thank the hand that gives me. I don't look behind the hand to see where did it ultimately come from. When my employer hands me my check, or every 2 weeks or whatever it is, I see a direct deposit in my account, I say, oh, Baruch Hashem, I got paid. Where did, in the olden days, on Fridays, the boss would come around and hand everybody a check and say, thank you very much. You thank the balabayas, but how many times when we get the paycheck do we say, oh, thank you, Rabbeinu Shalom, that you sent the money to my employer so that he can pay me. It's a chamr l'mare, b'tavi l'shakye. The wine belongs, the money belongs to God, and we say thank you to the butler employer who gave it to us. So the way we look at things is, it came from his hand to my hand. I only see his hand. I don't see the Rabbeinu Shalom's hand. And therefore, we don't always see the Rabbeinu Shalom in things that are happening to us. Something called sharashiyas. The footnote talked about this in great detail. People need to be able to go behind the story, between the lines, and see what's going on, and constantly see the Yad Hashem. We look at trees. People walk through a garden and they see a beautiful tree, or they see beautiful flowers. They say, wow, beautiful flowers, beautiful apples on the tree, rimonim, beautiful. People rarely, if ever, walk by a beautiful pomegranate tree, and they're beautiful. There's a royalty to it. It looks like it's a fruit with a crown on top, but it's a royal fruit, and it's beautiful. Rarely do people walk by a tree and say, wow, that tree must have beautiful roots. We don't talk about the roots. Why? Because they're bagrobin. They're buried under the dirt. Nobody sees the roots. If you don't see the roots, you don't talk about it. What you see is the fruit. What you see is the paycheck. And what we see is the balabai. So we say thank you. We don't see what's underneath there because we're not looking for it. So we don't say beautiful roots, and we don't say beautiful Rabbeinu Shalom for my paycheck. The same way that there are great details in every mitzvah, and there are great detailed halachas in every mitzvah, the details which are the fruits of a tree, this tree has to have a root. What's the root of all these mitzvahs, and what's the root of the details of these mitzvahs? Amnam Rav Kook writes, Shoresh Kedushas HaPratim Tzricha Lias Nikeres. The root of the holiness of these details needs to be recognized by us. Where does the fruit comes from a root? The holiness of the details of a mitzvah comes from some root. What is that root? That's the root from which the source of holiness comes into the fruit, the details. And the general proposition on which the whole Torah depends, and this is the true existence, the kiyum of the Jewish people, the chol tzivyoyne utmi musay, in its greatest full sense, it's only possible in Eretz Yisrael. A footnote talks about this in a mimer in the Pachad Yitzchak at Rosh Hashanah. He says that there's a period of time where Klal Yisrael's greatness comes to its peak. When is the period of time that Klal Yisrael's greatness comes to its peak? He calls that the time when all 613 mitzvahs can be observed. If there's something happening that doesn't allow 613 mitzvahs to be observed, that's not Klal Yisrael at its peak. When's the only time that 613 mitzvahs can be performed? You have to have a Beis Hamikdash, so you can do the mitzvahs of the Beis Hamikdash. You can do the Karbanos, the Zrikas Hadam, the Hadlakas HaMenayah. You need to have a Jewish king, because a Jewish king has particular mitzvahs from the 613 mitzvahs that apply to him. You have to have a Navi, because there are particular mitzvahs of the 613 mitzvahs that apply to a Navi. So in order for Klal Yisrael to be at its peak of holiness, it has to have the ability to do all 613 mitzvahs, which means the Jewish people need to be in Eretz Yisrael, which triggers Shemitah, Yovel, which will have a Beis Hamikdash, which will have Nevi'im, a Kohen Gadol, it'll have a Melech. Now the circumstances allow for 613 mitzvahs to be performed, some of them by Jewish people, some of them by Kohanim, some by a Kohen Gadol, some by Levium, some by a Melech, some by a Navi, but all together the Jewish people have hit the peak. All 613 mitzvahs can be performed to the extent that something is missing, which means that we cannot do all 613 mitzvahs. There's something lacking in the whole Kedusha of Klal Yisrael. The Kedusha of Klal Yisrael requires all 613 mitzvahs to be performed. So Rav Kook says that in order for the Jewish people to reach this epitome, this peak of their Kedusha in its greatest sense, it's only in Eretz Yisrael. Al Kain, Basher Kedushas Hasmanim Hi HaYesod Shel Kiyum HaTorah V'Ikaveh. Kedushas Hasman, Jewish people depend on calculating the proper time. This is where Kiddush HaChodesh is going to come in. We have no Yontif unless we know when Rosh Chodesh is. We can't keep track of Yontif unless we know when Rosh Chodesh is. That power is Kedushas Yisrael. When we make a bracha on Rosh Chodesh, in Musaf, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem, Mekadesh Yisrael, V'Rosh Chodesh. Blessed is Hashem, who sanctified the Jewish people, who sanctified Rosh Chodesh. When Rosh Chodesh is on Shabbos, in the Musaf on Shabbos, we say, Mekadesh HaShabbos V'Yisrael, Rosh Chodesh. Shabbos comes before Yisrael, because Shabbos doesn't need a calendar. It's every 7 days. So God has already sanctified Shabbos in a concrete way, 7 days. So we say, Mekadesh HaShabbos, God made Shabbos holy, V'Yisrael. Shabbos makes the Jewish people holy. For Rosh Chodesh, and the Jewish people make Rosh Chodesh holy. So we are the ones, God controls Shabbos. It's called Kaviyah V'Kaima. God controls Shabbos, and that's it. But we control Rosh Chodesh. We control time. Because based upon when we declare Rosh Chodesh, that's when Yom Tov will be. That's an amazing power. Jewish people have taken control of time. If I say, meaning the Sanhedrin says today's Rosh Chodesh, then Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot will be on a particular day. If I say tomorrow's Rosh Chodesh, Pesach, Sukkot, and Shavuos will be on a different day. Now, what does that mean? That means I took control of time. Therefore, Pesach will be on a particular day. What does that mean? Think about the ramifications. I say Rosh Chodesh is today. Therefore, Pesach will be 15 days from today. Erev Rosh Chodesh will be, Erev Pesach will be 14 days from today. Think of the ramifications. Now, I just told you through the Sanhedrin when you're going to eat matzah. I told you when you can't eat chametz. And if you don't trust Sanhedrin and you want to start Pesach on a different day, earlier or later, it'll end up eating matzah at the wrong time. It'll end up eating chametz when you're not allowed to. And if you eat chametz when you're not allowed to intentionally, chayiv misbei shemayim, chayiv the heavenly death. So what power has God given the Jewish people by telling them, you decide when Rosh Chodesh is? He's given them the power of life and death. You're going to decide when Pesach is, and therefore when to eat matzah and when not to eat chametz. You're going to decide when Shavuos is. You're going to decide when Sukkot is. You decide. It's in your hands. Time is in your hands. That's Kedushas Yisrael. We've taken the power to control time. Since this Kedusha that Klal Yisrael has, this holiness that Klal Yisrael has, is that they can sanctify time, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Rosh Chodesh, or we say on Yom Tov, Mekadesh Yisrael v'Hazmanim, the Jewish people sanctify time. That power to sanctify time means the ultimate, we're talking about the ultimate power, the ultimate Kedusha that Klal Yisrael can have. Where does Klal Yisrael get its ultimate Kedusha from? From the root of all Kedusha. The root of all Kedusha is in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, the ability to declare Rosh Chodesh and the ability to declare a leap year, which means the ultimate spiritual power to take control of time, you must be in Eretz Yisrael to do that, except if you're Rabbi Akiva. And no one in Eretz Yisrael is as big as you to do it. Other than that exception, Kedushas Hazman, to sanctify time, to take control of time, which is a godly act, you can only do that in Eretz Yisrael. And that requires Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael. It doesn't make a difference what's going on in Bavel. Chanina is a great Talmud Chacham, and when he left Eretz Yisrael, he was the greatest Talmud Chacham. He is going to be put in Chayrim if he continues what he's doing in Chutz La'aretz, because it's up to the people in Eretz Yisrael to do it. And how do we know that? The Gemara quoted the pasuk Ki Metzion Teitzei Sayur Udva Hashem Yerushalayim. So therefore, Rav Kook explains all the details of the halacha that come from a mitzvah, all that kedusha. The underlying foundation of the kedusha is the place where the ultimate kedusha rests, and that's in Eretz Yisrael. And therefore, if you want to take control of time through Kiddush HaChodesh or Ibush Shana, you need to be in Eretz Yisrael. Ki Metzion Teitzei Sayur Hashem Yerushalayim. So when the Ason opens its mouth, and God puts words in the mouth of the Ason, and the Ason says to Bilam, where are you going? Why did you hit me? Shalosh Regalim. And he's trying to get the idea across to Bilam. What are you doing? You're riding me to go to Chas v'Shalom, destroy the Jewish people by cursing them. You can't succeed. These are people that have the 3 Regalim. What's he saying to them? He's saying, the Ason is saying to Bilam, you can't do this. Don't you understand? These are people that are above time. These are people God put the control of time in their hands. They decide when Rosh Chodesh is. And through that, they decide when Yom Tov is. Mekadesh Yisrael v'hazmanim. These are people that decide when Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot is. Are you kidding me? You're going to ride me to destroy people with a klola for people who have taken control of time? This is a godly people. You can't curse away at people that have control of time. And that control of time comes from the Kedusha of Eretz Yisrael. And that's why the message came from the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael, Chanina, as great as you are to cease and desist in Chutz La'aretz. And if you don't, you're in Chayrim. And if the people in Bavel continue following you, let them go up to a mountain in Bavel, let them start a new religion, let them build a Mizbeah, let them designate people to sing over their kabbanas, and let them declare that they have a different God. Because if you don't understand that the ultimate Kedusha is in Eretz Yisrael, and that ultimate Kedusha allows the Gedolim in Eretz Yisrael to declare Rosh Chodesh. If you can't get through your head, you Gedolim in Bavel, you can't get that through your head, that the root of all Kedusha is in Eretz Yisrael, it's not in Chutz La'aretz. We're sorry, but go ahead, declare your own religion, build your own Mizbech, and go off in Zayagazun. But you can't be part of Klal Yisrael unless you understand the root of all the Kedusha has to come from Eretz Yisrael. If you think it's coming from some great yeshiva in Chutz La'aretz, if you think it's coming from Chanina and Bavel, you're in Chayrim. So Rav Kook says we need to understand from this Gemara, it's an amazing story in the Gemara. Chanina, Godel Hador, they're ready to put him in Chayrim. And they're ready to tell the people in Bavel, just make your own religion. You're not part of the Jewish people. Until you understand, Ki Metzion Teitzei Sayur Hashem Yerushalayim. That's it. So even if you have to live in Bavel, and even if you're a Talmud Chacham in Bavel, take a step back. You need to understand that the ultimate Kedusha is in Eretz Yisrael. It's not in Bavel. The ultimate Kedusha. No matter how great you are, and no matter how big a yeshiva is in Bavel, and even if you think you're the Godel Hador, you're still in Bavel, your yeshiva is in Bavel, and the Kedusha is in Eretz Yisrael. You need to get that through your head. That's where the Kedusha is. And if you can't get it through your head, it should be in Chayim. That's Kedusha's Eretz Yisrael. We see that it's just jumping off the page from the Gemara in Brachas. Rav Kook defines it. All these things are details. Chanina had many details. He knew a lot of halacha, and he knew all the details of the halacha, but when he has to get through his head that the details and all the halacha he knows, and all the Torah he knows, there's a source, Kedusha, for it. That source, Kedusha, is in Eretz Yisrael. All those Yidden need Yeshua Shav Yeshuas, all the Yidden need Nachama Shav Nachamas, all the Yidden need Refuah Shav Refuahs. All the Yidden need Bracha Shav Brachas, the Rosh Hashanah Shri Matzalas from all these Gezeres, from the Corona, the Chulu, all of them. A Sor Hiliyaka, Mimeni Bashea. It's coming from all different directions. The Rosh Hashanah Shri Matzalas, Yitzhen Mashiach Ben David Ben Heira, Mamish today, should build the Beis HaMikdash. We can help because we learned Masech Nemidas. We should be able to understand Hilchos Karbonos. We're still in the middle. Yet Hashem will continue. Everybody should take care of themselves. We're getting all kinds of contradictory messages from the Memshalah. We get contradictory messages from different doctors. This one says this one does this. And I want to make a comment. I made it to my family yesterday. I went to see some of my grandchildren in Yerushalayim that I haven't seen in a while. So I went to see them. We kept apart. We went into a little forest. We didn't go into the house. We went into a forest that's near their house. They were in one part, we were in the other part. I went with my wife to see my grandchildren. Everybody, one of the things that Google has done is not only are you able to look up good things, of course you're able to look up bad things. We're not talking about that. But Google has made everybody a biologist, a doctor, a chemist, a neurosurgeon, a cardiologist, a pharmacist. Google has made everybody into everything. Your doctor prescribes a medicine, you rush to Google, you check what the side effects of this medicine are, or maybe there's a better antibiotic for what you have. Then you call your doctor and you say, you know what I read on Google? I read that there's a better antibiotic. Everybody has become everything because they read on Google. So you go to Google, doctor this says, wear a mask. Doctor this says, don't wear a mask. Doctor this says, social distancing doesn't make a difference. Doctor this says, herd immunity. Doctor this says, herd immunity has been a disaster in Sweden. And you keep on reading and reading and reading and reading and reading. And then all of a sudden you get to a new subject. And this is what we see coming out every day. Almost this week there was a different one. We have Rosh Yeshivas and Rebbes coming out with letters. This Rebbe says that this is what you should do. And this Rebbe says this is what you should do. And this Rosh Yeshiva says you should do this. And this Rosh Yeshiva says this. This Rosh Yeshiva says it's okay to make a wedding. This Rosh Yeshiva says it can't be. This Rebbe says you should have a wedding. This Rebbe says you shouldn't. This Rebbe says you can have Shalosh Shidduchim and Shtivel. I'm not joking. There was a Rebbe that these things are mamish in letters you can get. This Rebbe says you can make a Shalosh Shidduchim. This Rebbe says make Shalosh Shidduchim only at home, not in the shul. All these kind of, everybody become a doctor. Everybody's become a scientist. Everybody's become an infection specialist, infectious disease specialist. You don't know who to listen to and what not to listen to. Rabbi said, I don't know what to listen to either. But there's something called a seichel pashut. We're talking about common sense. There's a common sense that lies at the bottom of all these things. And that is we're dealing with something that is very, very, very contagious. Bottom line. Kuli amalei pligi, this is very contagious. Something that's very contagious, we take precautions. It could be a mask, it could be social distancing, it could be not mingling with a lot of people. But we're dealing with something very, very infectious. And for people who are older or who have underlying conditions, it's a sakonas nefashis pashut. And that's kuli amalei pligi. And therefore, in the kuli amalei pligi, there is a vaccine, there is no vaccine. You can, once you have it once, you can't get it twice. We don't know anything about this thing because it hasn't been around long enough. There's common sense, there's a seichel pashut. We talked about this a long time ago. The Rebbe Shalom many times is talking to us and says, just use your seichel pashut. It's very infectious, it's very contagious, and it's very dangerous. Use your seichel. Go where you need to go because you have to with the proper precautions. Don't go where you don't need to go at all. And the shaila about shuls, not shuls, yes shuls, do the right thing. Daven at an outside meeting. That's my opinion. I got an email yesterday from a particular shul. I won't mention the name of the shul. I got an email from a particular shul in Mat Beit Shemesh that so-and-so tested positive. And if you've been around him, or you were around him, or the email said something like this, if you were around him, or you're in the area where he sits within 15 minutes after he left, you need to check yourself. Now, I don't know how to do that. I don't remember if I was, and now personally, I wasn't there, so, because I don't go inside. I only daven outside. But how would I remember if 15 minutes after he left, first of all, I don't look around the shul the whole time if I'm in shul, who comes and who goes at a particular time. I don't know. But how would I know that I was in the vicinity within 15 minutes after he left? How would I know that? And that could be a shaila of pikuach nefesh. Was I there when he was there, or 15 minutes, whatever it stays in the air, 3 minutes, 5? How would I keep cheshbon of all these things? How do you keep cheshbon of such a question, which is a shaila of pikuach nefesh? The answer is you can't. You can't keep this cheshbon. Stay safe. Just use common logic. Common logic and hishtadlus l'shem Hashem. I want to be a healthy year, to continue learning, to continue davening, to continue under Hashem. I want to mamash live so I can see Mashiach coming and building the Beis HaMikdash. Do the right thing. Don't listen to all the crazy, everybody's contradicting each other. There's a seichel pashut. There is a common denominator here, and use your seichel pashut. Everybody should have a wonderful day, a wonderful Shabbos Kodesh, Parshas Chazorim. We should be zoicha before Tisha B'Av, today mamish. We've been learning through the Sefer, that's what the name of the Sefer is. God will turn the Avodah. We say 3 times in Shemoneh Esrei. Rebbeinu Shalom, return to us the Beis HaMikdash so that we begin the Avodah. Everybody's crying about we want to get back into the shul. Let's start crying about we want to get to the Beis HaMikdash. We say it 3 times a day. Stop and pause for a couple of seconds when you say the words. Our little group here has learned Masechta Midas. We know about the Beis HaMokeh. We know about the Mizbeach. We know about the pious. We know about the lotteries. We know about cleaning the Mizbeach. We know these things. When we say V'hashev es havoida, pause for a moment. V'hashev es havoida. Lidver Beisecha. V'isha Yisrael l'svilasam mehira ba'avat kal b'atzari. Rebbeinu Shalom, give us back the Beis HaMikdash. Which Beis HaMikdash? The Beis HaMikdash that the Azara was 187 by 135. The Ezras Nosson that was 135 by 135. The Beis HaMikdash that had the outer Mizbeach and the inner Mizbeach. The Beis HaMikdash that had a pious. The Beis HaMikdash that Levium sang over the Kabbalas. Think about this. There's nothing wrong with pausing when you say the words to think about what you're saying. What avoda? What avoda are you talking about? Return the avoda. Well, now Rabbi said we know a lot about it. We know what the Beis HaMikdash looks like. We know a lot about the avoda. Stop. Stop now, especially during the 9 days. Return the avoda. Think about what we learned. That's the avoda we want. Everybody should have a wonderful, safe, and healthy day. And a Guzut Shabbos Kodesh. And Me'at Hashem, we should be able on Sunday to meet with Mashiach, having already been here. And Mashiach will be teaching the rest of Talmud for everybody. So everybody will get it straight exactly, because when Mashiach teaches, it's going to be absorbed by everybody. We should be Zoich to Mashiach that came here. Amen. Everybody have a wonderful day in Sei Gesund. Eliezer, sei gesund. Eliezer is one of the supervisors here. He's the head of the pious. He's one of the heads of the lottery. We don't start till I get the finger up from him, and we don't end till I see his smile. Sei gesund.